Hello and welcome to CSA's webinar series, CSA Cloud Bytes. Today's webinar is sponsored by Hyperproof and titled, Why Using Common Controls Changed the Game for Nutanix and Qorus. A few housekeeping items before we start. You can enter your questions at any time during the presentation by using the question tab at the bottom of your screen. There is some time reserved at the end of the webcast to address questions. Additionally, the slides from the webinar are not provided, but you can access this recording at any time by using the same link to view the webinar again or share it with a colleague. So I'd like to introduce our presenter today. We have Johan Olivier, the Security and Compliance Director at Qorus Software, where he's responsible for driving security and privacy compliance across the business. His career in the compliance space is backed by 22 years of experience as a software solutions architect. Having worked in 7 countries across 4 continents, he has developed a special interest in behavioral sciences, psychology, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. He's a motivational speaker at tech conferences and uses his engineering experience and principles of cognitive behavior therapy to motivate and inspire others to build a happy and fulfilling career. Johan's also an active participant of the Cloud Security Alliance work group and has recently been named lead author across several domains of the CSA Cloud Control Matrix implementation guidelines. Also with us today is Enrico Telemaque, Manager of Technical Programs, Cloud Services Compliance at Nutanix, a global leader in cloud software. Enrico holds 17 years of consulting experience, leading diverse cross-functional technology and business projects that achieve actionable results. He also has over a decade of security experience within investigative response, IT governance, infrastructure, development, and compliance. His areas of focus are program and product management, cloud technology, agile methodologies, release management, QA, training, risk assessment, security, information governance, compliance, and SDLC. Moderating the panel today will be Matt Leto, Chief Growth Officer at Hyperproof. Matt has grown small, medium, and large enterprise software companies, including OpenLink Financial, SunGuard Data Systems, and Inform Technology. He has 25 years of experience building, implementing, marketing, and selling software around the world. Matt is passionate about technology and providing customers solutions that make their lives better. Thank you all for joining us. We're really excited to have you here, and I will turn things over now to today's presenters.
All right, thanks, Brooke. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Leto, your moderator for today. And thanks for the introduction, Brooke, and we'll get right into it. So I thought, where we'd start is just a little bit of background on Enrico and Nutanix, and also Johan and Qorus, and talk just a little bit about what's going on within their organizations. What are they focused on from a compliance perspective to provide some context? And then I'll also talk just briefly about what we do at Hyperproof, but then we'll pivot in to the lion's share of what we want to talk about today. So with that, I'm going to forward the slide here and actually hand it over to Enrico to really kind of introduce everybody to Nutanix, first of all, and some of the challenges that Enrico's facing over at Nutanix as well. So Enrico, over to you.
All right, thanks, Matt. So again, Enrico Telemaque, happy to be presenting today. I work for Nutanix. Nutanix provides cloud services, essentially, that unify IT operations. A lot of what we do it revolves around modernizing data centers. So providing a hyperconverged infrastructure, with compute, storage, virtualization, and networking as part of a package. We also give customers the ability to move apps and data across various cloud environments, and really also provide the ability to run applications at scale. And outside of those core features of what we do, we have a variety of products that relate to hybrid cloud infrastructure, cloud management tools such as cost governance or security and compliance governance, disaster recovery as a service, et cetera, as well as other solutions around unified storage, desktop as a service, database management, and so on. So specific to the team that I work in within Nutanix is I work on the product compliance team. So this team is responsible for certification programs for cloud products that we have. So we have a combination of cloud products, but we also have on-prem products that are part of our government compliance programs. That's also something my team manages, but I'm predominantly responsible for our cloud products. And that covers ISO 27001, 17, 18, as well as 27701, as well as SOC 2 for a portfolio of 5 to 9 products between both.
Great. Thanks, Enrico. That's great context. And Johan, we're going to kick it over to you. I'm gonna forward over here to Qorus and give you an opportunity to kind of provide some context for everybody as well.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Johan Olivier. I am the Security and Compliance Director at Qorus Software. And we started off in Cape Town, South Africa. We still have our engineering team and support team in Cape Town. But we've, a couple of years ago, moved into Seattle. Our headquarters are in Seattle. And we offer a SaaS solution for sales enablement. It basically allows and enables bid teams to create RFPs and to respond to RFPs and document automation and document generation a lot more effectively and in a streamlined way, allowing the bid teams to save time, save money, etc., and win new business. So we've realized that customers trust us with their data, and we want to honor that by showing how we take security and privacy seriously. And we've, a couple of years ago, started enrolling a SOC 2 Type 2 program at Qorus Software. And the observation period actually runs over 12 months, meaning there's continuous observation of the effectiveness of our implemented controls. And we also find that working across regions, it's important to not only focus on one compliance framework or one compliance program, but to be cognizant of the various needs, the various compliance programs, ISO, SOC, etc., and the GDPR requirements, as an example, in the EU, and take controls from those various regulatory requirements and implement it into our compliance framework. That gives our business a lot more agility. It creates a lot more robustness and resilience, but it also means that when we talk to customers or prospects, we can give them the reassurance that we are serious about their privacy and the security of their data. Thank you, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Johan. So I will talk briefly about Hyperproof. And this is a build out slide. So I'm going to build it all out really quickly, everybody, so that we don't have to watch it build out. So just bear with me for 1 second. Sorry for the delay here. But, just to introduce Hyperproof, I'm the Chief Growth Officer for Hyperproof. I've been with Hyperproof since its genesis back in 2018. And I just want to thank everybody, first of all, for taking time, spending your time, part of your Friday with us. But to talk about Hyperproof, we're a software company. Surprise, surprise, I guess. And we're really focused on what we would call compliance operations or ComOps. And really at the center of our universe, we've spent a ton of time really kind of looking at the nature of the problem that a lot of us face in relationship to staying on top of our controls, and why do organizations struggle to stay on top of kind of the control operations piece and make sure that they're operating week in and week out, month in and month out. And what the more we kind of dug underneath the details, we realized that a real problem for everybody is that controls are they have a lot of heavy lifting associated with them, and as a result of so much heavy lifting, and generally people are operating on fragmented tech stacks and using spreadsheets to do a lot of this. Not surprisingly, people generally comply with their audits more than they actually sit there and manage their controls. And we really wanted to change that. So at the center of our world are controls, and really helping organizations sit there and figure out how to automate as much of their control infrastructure as they possibly can. And so that's the reason you see that over there in the center with us, because that is the center of our universe at Hyperproof. But we feel like if we can do that well for organizations and really help facilitate that, then it leads to some it really serves a variety of masters from risk, which is what controls were really created for. They were created to sit there and mitigate risk that we're all exposed to, and get to a place where you can actually look at your risk in real time because your controls are being actively managed day in and day out. And likewise, you can look at what's going on with your compliance frameworks and how you're actually adhering to those. And then ultimately, we want to get to a place where audits aren't the Super Bowl. Today, they're the Super Bowl, because people, that's when we kind of snap back and get back in compliance. But that's not the way we think it should work. We'd like to ultimately give people assurance that, hey, you're going to pass the audit because you've been paying attention to the controls all along. So anyways, that's a little bit about hyperproof. I won't bore you with all the details today because that's not what we're here for. But just a quick introduction of hyperproof itself. So moving ahead, and just to kind of set up our discussion today. So if you remember the actual title to this, it's why using common control frameworks changed the game for Nutanix and Qorus. And, just to talk briefly about, common control frameworks, and I'm sure Johan and Enrico, I'm going to ask you guys to add some color to this, but, at the heart of it all, when we start to adhere to multiple frameworks, it becomes easy to sit there and duplicate controls, which is a big no-no in the world we all live in, because it's obviously not efficient. And so really trying to get to common control frameworks, reusing controls across frameworks to serve multiple requirements. That's really the subject of our discussion today. And it's a big, topic as we all grow and expand as organizations. We're exposed to more and more, requirements from different governmental bodies and different regulatory bodies. And so understanding how to rationalize these things is a big topic, I think, for all of us. But Enrico, Johan, I'm sure you guys can add even more flavor to what I just said. I'd love to see if you guys have anything you'd like to say in relationship to common control frameworks before we start jumping into the details here.
Yes, absolutely, Matt. Thank you. I think the Common Controls Framework is really important to organizations who operate in a multi-region, multi-jurisdiction sphere where there are different privacy laws that apply based on where you operate or where your data subjects, your customers reside. It could be that you want to satisfy the requirements for GDPR in the EU, but also comply with CCPA in California. And there's the PIPEDA in Canada, etc. So depending on how your business operates, you want to satisfy and give reassurance to your prospects and customers that you will meet their security requirements and that you can be trusted with the data, that you have a really strong and a really good compliance framework in place. Now, if you do that and you want to put duplicate controls for each of these frameworks, it becomes a mammoth task, and your compliance team, your security team, can easily enter audit fatigue or compliance fatigue. Some of these frameworks contain up to 700, 800 controls. And so if you put down into your organization multiple frameworks or programs, you're looking at thousands of controls, and you need to collect evidence, and it's a big task and a costly task. So what the Common Controls Framework allows you is to compare the different requirements, mandates, and then pick controls that will really allow you to satisfy the various requirements. So you can individualize or select a control, apply it into your organization in a way that single control can satisfy the requirements of 3 different compliance frameworks. That kind of reduction of the number of controls that you need to roll out just makes the entire process a lot easier, a lot more cost effective, and it standardizes the evidence collection, the processes and procedures across your organization, and it makes it easier for you to then operate as an international business. That is my take on it. There's huge value in implementing a Common Controls Framework. Enrico, what do you think?
Yeah, just to add to those great points. Certainly I see on both sides the value of having the Common Controls Framework. I think about it in terms of controls are definable by an organization, whereas requirements are things that are generally more set in stone or created by the industry. So, using that common controls framework, we're able to kind of create controls that are more focused on, say, like a process. And then having that ability to map to multiple requirements means that teams are more focused, or they see compliance more as a day-to-day operation versus, a technical document that they need to map certain requirements to what they're doing. So that's kind of how we like to leverage the control framework, or a common control framework, and really just keep it simple, easy to understand, and have it just focused on what people are doing on the day-to-day versus, here's compliance with another set of requirements or items that we need to deal with. And as Johan mentioned, become audit fatigued very quickly.
Yeah. So I knew that you guys would do better justice to common control frameworks than I would. So I really appreciate both of your feedback there. And so just to kind of explain everybody where we're going to go from here, we've got a lot of different questions to ask Johan and Enrico. So I'm going to be firing off questions. You're going to hear a lot of great kind of thought around CCF and as we go here. So just to start, a couple of different questions, which I think are going to interplay well with what was already said. First of all, just what prompted, both of your organizations to really work towards the CCF? What was the event that really started to move you in that direction? And beyond that, I think you've already enumerated some of these things, but the key benefits of using the CCF, which I think, Johan and Enrico both spoke to a little bit already, but more color and depth on that would be awesome. And then, what problems, does having a CCF ultimately solve? So those are kind of, and if you forget the questions, guys, just say, Matt, kind of refresh my memory on it. But those are the three questions to start. And I think since Enrico, you just finished, I'm gonna basically ask you to start, and then Johan will move over to you from there.
Sure. So I'm just answering a question here around why it's important for organizations to implement a common controls framework as a good starting point here.
That, but also just what even kind of prompted you to start moving in that direction, Enrico, maybe to begin with, and,
Sure.
and kind of the benefits and problems that you see, CCF ultimately solving.
Sure. So I would say the biggest challenge at Nutanix is that, from a compliance perspective, we are doing compliance at a product level. So different than having organizational compliance, where you're validating, say, HR facilities and other processes. On top of that, we are validating the procedures and implementation for various cloud products, which at times have similar operational procedures and use similar technology, and at times they don't. So for us, having a common controls framework really helps us organize, let's say one ISO control that could apply to multiple requirements. And then, using a tool like Hyperproof, we can actually split that control into kind of a parent-child relationship where we can monitor the performance of various products for a control, but not have to manage, say, 9 copies of a control. Yeah. So that was one of the challenges we had in a spreadsheet model, where collecting this information and reviewing it in a consistent fashion was difficult. So moving to a more common control framework, even from an auditing perspective, if now we have an auditing request list, auditors, I still think in terms of one requirement, one evidence request. And they continue to do that. And we're finding that there's just a lot of overlap. So that is another way that we, by creating a common controls framework and mapping those requirements, we can only ask product teams or engineers or HR or who have you one time for something. And also from an optimization perspective, maybe we can create one procedure or have one policy that can, check off multiple requirements.
Got it. That Thanks, Enrico. They're very helpful. And Johan, same set of questions to you.
Yes. So first of all, our compliance team feel that we don't want to do audits and have a security and privacy program just for the sake of getting the report at the end of the day or getting a certificate. We want business to really get a return on investment. It's a cost center, and we really want to make sure that we give back to the business something that will increase the resilience of the business and make the business more efficient. Our controls actually spread across the entire business. So you want the HR team to receive a control and see how can it help the team operate more efficiently, more accurately, and across all the divisions, HR, finance, engineering, etc. So when we do this, we don't want to adopt all the frameworks that exist and that have been designed to cater for different scenarios, different threats, and possible risks to your business. So what we chose was a compliance program that fits our organization, but I felt the need to go and do a crosswalk and a mapping of the controls that we have in our design of our program and compare them with the different other compliance programs that's available and the content and the design of the controls within them. And then borrow some of those controls from ISO, from NIST, from the different frameworks, and design them into our compliance frameworks so that they satisfy our SOC requirement and fits into our business and complement operation and the procedures that exist in the various divisions of our business, but it also streamline the compliance program and the maintenance around that control. And what we found was that when we do this crosswalk, we discover multiple great controls that we can introduce into our program, and that will satisfy not only the SOC requirement, but also it will also satisfy GDPR requirements, ISO requirements, etc. So whether we adopt additional compliance frameworks or not, whether we get ISO certified or just find ourselves in a position where we need to get a specific order done, we will already have a head start. We already have a design in our organization and our security and privacy program that caters for those different certifications. So first of all, I wanted the Common Controls Framework to add more robustness and resiliency to our organization in terms of security and privacy. The second thing is how do we take compliance and help the organization generate revenue? And I feel when a prospect goes through a vendor risk assessment with us as a supplier, as a SaaS product offering, we need to be ready. We need to support the sales team. We need to make sure we've got answers that will give the prospect peace of mind that we can be trusted with the data. And I found that in the different regions, there are not industries, but different geographical regions, companies prefer different compliance programs. As an example, I find in the EU, European Union, there's a lot of focus on the transfer of data nationally, and how do they make sure that that's done safely and securely. Whereas in the US, a SOC compliance program is more widely accepted and quite popular. And in other regions, you might find prospects or customers who choose to go with ISO. So when you engage with a prospect who has a specific preference, how do you engage with them and say, well, we are not ISO certified, but take a look at our compliance program and the controls that we've designed, our common controls. Although we have a SOC 2 Type 2 report, our controls should give you the answers you're looking for. And that's why the Common Controls Framework allows the security team to engage with prospects and go onto calls and explain how the measures and the procedures and the technical enablers that we've implemented to not only satisfy our SOC requirement, but also caters for the different compliance platforms or frameworks that exist globally. So we are an international business, and I find that if you apply a Common Controls Framework in a way that supports the sales team, it gives the company a competitive advantage, and it helps with generating additional business and revenue. The other thing is also that we need to respect that various privacy laws across the globe. Your data subjects, your end users may exist in regions that most privacy laws, there's a thread that runs through them. There's a common theme that runs through them. They're quite similar, but there can be small detail that you need to implement as an organization in order to comply with that law. And looking broadly and widely across the different compliance programs and selecting and designing your common controls frameworks enables you to also cater for the different privacy laws. Yeah. So those are the things. Those are the things that we kept in mind when we decided to implement and design common control frameworks. It does solve a lot of issues, and there are a lot of benefits. Like I mentioned earlier, it deduplicates the number of controls that you need to maintain. It alleviates compliance fatigues. It simplifies the intake of new compliance frameworks. It standardizes and streamlines operations and across your business, and your audit process is a lot smoother. And I think it also helps with the audit process. If you are well prepared, if your compliance program contains common controls, it's a lot easier to ensure that they're operating effectively and the audit process runs a lot smoother.
Yeah. No, that was, thank you so much to both of you. I mean, because it's very interesting just listening to kind of both, both sides of this, where, Enrico over at Nutanix really kind of using a common control framework in relationship to what I would call almost product level security and making sure that all the products are secure. And Johan, you're really looking at a CCF. And I know you both look at CCFs in both of these angles, but it's just interesting, also in relationship to as we expand as organizations to different regions and have to intersect with different regulations, how a CCF is useful in that case too. So kind of to, an additional question in relationship to what we were just talking about, and if we can kind of go in reverse order this time. So we'll start with you this time, Johan, and then pivot over to Enrico. Is just the challenges in building a CCF. So what are some of the obstacles that have kind of been in your way, and just highlighting that for the audience that's here today.
Sure, Matt, and I hope I'm not putting anyone off, because usually it's easy to identify more challenges and more obstacles than the end result gives us. So it's easy to make a long list of challenges there. But let's start with as in my role, and in terms of being responsible for security and privacy, it's easy for me to select too many controls, and it is very difficult to implement a common controls framework and deduplicate and actually get to that end goal, because we come across controls from different frameworks and we find them very valid and interesting, and it's natural for us to want to implement those controls into our organization and make them part of the common controls framework. But you shouldn't, overwhelm your business with implementing too many controls and procedures and standards. You need to find a balance for what complements your business operations and provide the security and privacy that you and your customers are looking for. So to trim back and to differentiate between the essential controls and the nice to haves was quite a challenge for me as well, because of the passion that I have. Another thing was the manual crosswalking was, and that's the exercise to actually take different compliance frameworks and map the controls from the one framework to the other, and find the matching items, so that you can say, well, I've got control 1, and this control is going to satisfy the requirements from three different frameworks. It's difficult to map, to create that mapping sometimes. And when you look at different frameworks, your interpretation need to be accurate. And if there's a requirement and it's in the control and the framework that you have in place, and you come across another framework and you want to create that common control, you need to make 100% sure that the implementation guidelines and your interpretation of that framework that you want to satisfy this common control with is accurate, and that you haven't gone into a form of bias, believing that it's easy and simple and you've got all the things that are already. You need to make 100% sure. And not all compliance frameworks come with very detailed and accurate and implementation guidelines. So you need to sometimes reach out to the community or reach out to other professionals to make 100% sure you interpret the requirement accurately. I also find it's tricky to modernize some of the controls. I think in some of the frameworks we are looking at controls that were designed that are a bit archaic, and I say that respectfully. There's a lot of talk about a corporate network as an example, controls satisfying security and privacy around the corporate network, but I think globally we're working remotely. And we use SaaS services, we use web-based solutions. So what does the corporate network really look like, and how would you satisfy and design a common control that doesn't fit into your corporate network, but has satisfied the security and privacy requirements of the remote work, cloud-based tooling and systems that you use. So just to modernize controls without moving away from the audit requirements and the framework requirements was quite tricky. Then, of course, you have the controls and you've got your design. Now you need a central repository and a structured way to manage the controls. You need to make sure you roll them out into your organization. And it's very difficult across the business to test how effective the controls work. You need to make sure your stakeholders, your subject matter experts in those areas are on board, they've bought into the compliance program, and that they understand the need and they give you their full support. And you need to make sure that testing of the control, implementing a control doesn't mean it functions very well. So you need to go back and test and refine and test and refine. That's quite a process as well. And the last one, I think, is how to make the design of and the selection of common controls framework repeatable. What methodology do you put in place so that when someone needs to take over your leadership role, that they have a very clear method to carry on and a good cadence and a way to clearly define common controls. So those are some of the challenges that we faced.
Great, Johan. That was that was a good list. Enrico, I'd love to hear from you about the same thing.
Sure. So certainly to add to what Johan mentioned, some of the challenges that we certainly deal with on a regular, which I think any business does, is around communication. From a compliance perspective. So continued compliance is certainly something that we're just continuing to communicate and roll out to groups. As I'd mentioned before, thinking of compliance not as another task on your to-do list, but more so an extension of what you're already doing, from a security best practice or operational best practice. So as we continue to improve our set of controls and provide really more understanding of what a control is, that's certainly something engineers like to understand more about. Is okay, what is it that I need? So as we build out our controls, we think about it in terms of, are there certain corporate policies that apply to this control? Are there standards that, say, application security has implemented that follow our SDL process? And then also, on top of that, as teams are onboarded, to take on, let's say, an ISO certification, or they're going to participate in SOC 2 next year, it's continuing to build out our controls with the knowledge we continue to capture over the years, where we might put recommendations saying, to satisfy this control, this is what we're looking for, as well as from an auditor perspective, this is what you're going to be expected to provide as we go through our audits. So continuing to improve awareness and communication is helping us overcome the challenge of, again, that audit fatigue, or just feeling like we're always knocking on the door and people disappear more quickly than usual. So that's one area that's helpful. Another thing I find too is a challenge is really scope of controls. There are some controls that are owned by, say, one part of an organization, say corporate versus HR, but there might be processes that overlap to other teams. So that's certainly a challenge, is finding the right owner or someone who wants to take ownership of a control more so, but also understanding, I think, about the shared responsibilities model, especially for Nutanix, where we have cloud services, but we also leverage hosted platforms like AWS, Azure, GCP, as well as we have our own on-prem service. But when we look at certain controls, some are more catered towards customer-focused controls or customer data. Others are more focused towards internal process. And then have other ones as well that are more at the corporate level. So the challenge there is just truly understanding the scope. And that really helps us consolidate the controls to ensure that we have the right owners. And then that what is being provided will satisfy the ask.
Got it. Very helpful, Enrico. And thank you to you both on that. Looking at the time, we've got about 14 minutes. I know, people are going to have questions. So I think what I might do just a little bit more of is asking one question to each of you to make sure that we make it all the way through here. So pivoting to the next question, and I'll direct this one, to you, Enrico, and then we're going to come with another question to Johan here in a second. But as you think about structuring controls to actually accommodate multiple compliance program requirements, can you talk a little bit about kind of the process you undertake to make sure that because inevitably, as we I think all know, requirements, while they might look and feel the same, there's inevitably nuances to them. How do you go about navigating to create one control to solve for multiple requirements? What's your process through thinking about that and going through that particular piece of it, Enrico? Did that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. Certainly one approach I take is almost the reverse approach, where, as we go through our audits, I focus time on post-audit, really reviewing, what the requests were, what auditors may have associated a certain request to a certain requirement, and looking at starting with that like one-to-one relationship, as I mentioned, maybe, one control, one requirement. It's how do we continue to break that down, where a lot of times I think of satisfying a control is usually through some type of document. So looking for commonalities where there might be one procedural document, let's say user access management. There's so many requirements in that, but they're almost all the same, I find. So how can we look at certain procedures teams make? And if we can satisfy multiple requirements with one or two documents, then we can create a consolidated control that just has maybe a process. So user onboarding, user offboarding is one process. Managing privilege access could be another. The systems used, to secure access could be another. So taking that reverse approach is helpful for me to reduce the framework. And also the important part, though, too, is making sure you communicate this with auditors. Otherwise, every year they're probably just going to use the same request list. So it's good to work ahead of time with them and refine the controls. So that way your process runs a little more smoothly. Great.
Thanks, Enrico. So, Johan, I have a different question for you that I'm sure the audience will be interested in, and that's when you're designing controls for your organization, some of the considerations you take into account, which I think you've already touched on some of that already. And also, I think, all of us could use, a reference source, places to go to sit there and really kind of seed our thought process around the controls we might want to have within our organizations. And so interested in what you refer to, what bodies you refer to, and maybe a little bit of guidance for the audience about where they might look. But again, the first question is really the considerations you take into account when designing a control. And part two is really, what are some of the reference sources you're referring to along the way?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So I think there are four main principles that I keep in mind when I design controls or when I revisit our controls and update them. And these are, first of all, the regulatory requirements and contractual obligations. I want to make sure that we as a business satisfy the regulatory requirements, and we operate within the law, and we take all the right steps in that regard. I also want to make sure that when we look at controls, whether it's a new framework or revising existing controls, that we are cognizant of the terms and conditions and the clauses in the contracts that we sign with our customers. It's important. The customers also need to do their own vendor risk assessment, and the security clauses that they put forward to us as a vendor need to be honored. So what is the best way to make sure I cover both those requirements, the regulatory requirements and the contractual obligations, and can the controls in my security and privacy framework or program satisfy those requirements? The security and privacy program shouldn't operate separately from the business. Like I said earlier, it should supplement the business. So when it comes to legal and to contracting, we want to make sure our program actually back that 100%. The second is talking about the business. Let's take that as a point as well. We consider the business landscape and the potential risks and threats. So we make sure we update it with the threat actors, the tendencies, what's happening out in terms of cybersecurity across the world. And we take that seriously, and we prepare our business for it. We also look at how our business may evolve. We might open up a new office, move into office, or we might choose to work remotely. We might change the structure of roles in the organization, or the technology and the product design. When those things change, we need to make sure that our business remain nimble and agile, but that we are resilient, and the common controls framework, the controls that we have in place, will be updated accordingly. So I keep that in mind. And then the community. I look at perspectives from the community, and I'm an active participant in the Cloud Security Alliance Common Controls Framework Design Group, and that's actually a great working group. We engage with fellow professionals on a voluntary basis to design mappings and common control framework sets. You can also look at the secure controls framework body, ISACA, etc. But I think it's really important for all security personnel and those who run compliance frameworks for the organization to be actively involved in these communities. You rub shoulders with other professionals. They have a lot of experience that you can grab and get new perspectives on the things that you can apply into your organization and your framework and the common controls design there. And then something that's really important to me is a people's first approach. I want to make sure that when I engage with subject matter experts across our business division leaders, that I respect the fact that they have their own goals and targets and stresses and responsibilities, and there's no way that the security team can operate on their own. So I want to first look at how does the division operate, what are the processes that are in place, what are the standards that are in place, and be cognizant of how do I add to that and complement that with my control design, and not do my control designs separately and then force that onto a business leader. I want to work with the business to complement. It means that they have a sense of ownership, they participate in the design, they feel part of it, which means you'll get a lot better support, and it will make a lot more sense to your business when you comply with the different requirements in that way. And then the last thing is, it's really important to me to say again, I mentioned earlier that your audit and your compliance certificate or report that you get shouldn't be a once-off. It should be sustainable. It should add value to your business. So it's really important to me that you design your controls in a way that they are not overwhelming, they make sense, they fit in with your business model, and they cater for the risks that your business might face. So they must be sustainable. You must be able to automate some of them if you can. And it's definitely important that you design them in a way to achieve continuous compliance. You don't want to get a few weeks before the final audit and then rush to collect evidence and get everything ready for the auditor. If you can design controls that can stay fresh and that that you can implement into a continuous compliance model, it's a lot easier for the compliance team and for the overall business as an overall. So those are the 4 things: the regulatory requirements, contractual obligations, the business, what works for the business, what can you take and learn from the community, get involved in those forums and those work groups. It's great to be part and build this relationship with fellow professionals and learn from one another and bring that into your organization and then design it so it's sustainable and manageable.
Great, Johan. That was super helpful even for me. So I really appreciate that. And I'm going to kind of skip one of the questions we had there because I think it's been well answered already. And I'm going to move to kind of the triggering event. And I think that in a way these have already been covered as well, but maybe highlighting some of the events that trigger both of you to consider adding new controls to your environment. I think you've touched on a lot of them, but maybe if we can try and summarize those for the audience, that would be great too. And so I think we'll kind of do reverse order here. So we'll start with you, Johan, and then pivot to you, Enrico, and then we've got 2 more questions before we wrap it up here.
Sure, I'm going to keep it simple. Change in the regulation. Keep in touch with the regulatory authorities. See when there are changes. Make sure that you implement those changes, understand them very, very well, and implement those in your organization. Changes to the structure of the organization, the roles, the products, the technology, etc. When those triggers come into your organization, make sure you update your compliance framework. Even if there's executive, tactical, and strategic planning, make sure that the compliance and the security and the resilience of the organization are kept in mind. Make sure that when the business define their strategy and plans for the quarter or for the year or whatever the period might be, that there's a participant from a security perspective in those sessions so that you can advise and also guide and make decisions and adopt some of the controls necessary. And then the people, people change. The company culture might evolve as the company grow. It might be necessary to roll out more detailed procedures to satisfy the same requirement. A 20-man company might be fine with a set of controls. When they turn into a 150-man company or 500-man company, things change and the business change, and you need to make sure that compliance stays on top of that. So those are some of the things. There are a lot more, but I'll move over to Enrico for him to answer some of these.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, certainly to touch upon that. For us, new controls generally come in, again, when we have new frameworks or programs we're introducing. There's definitely opportunity to reuse what we have, but we might have to create new controls that are very specific to a certain product or process. When we have kind of an adjustment of scope, as I was mentioning before, maybe there's a shift in responsibilities from a customer or a vendor to Nutanix. That would be another instance where we might have to bring controls back in scope, or if we're sunsetting certain processes, we remove controls from scope. And then also lastly, in terms of if you look at a security best practice or just compliance as a whole, you have the opportunity to create new controls in response to or in preparation for dealing with, let's say, process change that may impact an organization. So let's say a company has a security incident or some other item that affects business. This would be a great opportunity to implement or refine existing controls to deal with addressing that type of issue moving forward, but also just company growth, as Johan mentioned, as people change, as companies' size increases, there is likely going to be a lot of change that needs to be done to a control that might have just been managed by one person, or just talk through only one process that was more siloed than spreading across various groups.
Great.
Yes, Enrico, and something that I just want to add, that I just thought of it now that I forgot to mention it, is that responding to security questionnaires and filling out RFP questions actually can give your organization a lot of insight into what is needed and what the desire is in terms of your prospects. So if your security team respond to security questionnaires, give them an opportunity to get a feeling and understanding of common questions, common demands. There might be something like universal endpoint management. If your organization didn't put a lot of emphasis on it, and you see UEM or universal endpoint management coming up in most questionnaires, you will see there's a need for it, and you might reconsider and see it as an opportunity to introduce some of those controls into your organization, and that will enable you to respond to questionnaires and answer prospects in that regard a lot better, and it helps your organization to respond and to be more resilient in that regard as well. You get a feel of what's out there, take it, implement it, consider it, and make it part of your program.
Yeah, that's yeah. Thank you both. I mean, that's you're right. I mean, there's a bunch of inflection points out there that make us kind of reassess what we need to do. But even using the security assessments we all receive as another mechanism to think about it is definitely a good vector to slice it by as well. So I know we're real short on time right now. I'm going to ask. Maybe we'll do a bit of a speed round here, but as we've kind of peeled the onion, we've talked a lot about the designing and kind of when to look at maybe potentially adding or subtracting controls. Would be just interested in both of your perspectives on two things. One is just when how often to review controls would be one piece, and just kind of really reassessing your control stack and understanding when to rationalize that. And then the other is, as we kind of peel the onion and get into operating these controls, where all of these controls need to be reassessed on a cadence. And I guess just interested in how you actually start to think about the timing of the reassessment of all of those controls, and how you approach that part of it. And so I know we've got limited time and we want to answer people's questions, so we could maybe try and keep the answers to about a minute or so. That would be great. That might leave us about 5 here at the end. You want to go first, Johan?
Sure. There's a Japanese word called kaizen. It means continuous improvement. So what I do is I take the opportunity when I need to refresh evidence on my controls. Some controls you need to refresh evidence every month, some every quarter, some biannually, etc. So whenever I refresh evidence, I look at the control and compare it with what we have as a business and how our business landscape looks like. And then I take that opportunity to refresh a control. There is also another, you can also say you want to revisit your control design just after the audit based on the feedback, but that might be overwhelming. You might have 350 or 200 and whatever controls, and that could be a massive project to do in one go. So I believe in continuous compliance and continuous improvement.
Great. Thanks so much, Johan. And Enrico?
Yep. Yeah, certainly in terms of how often reviewing, one of the things I definitely like to use periods after, say, an internal audit to do that reassessment. Again, you do have the struggle of, if there are certain findings, you generally have the limited time to get them resolved before the external audit starts. But I find that's when, at least for me, everything is fresh in terms of processes and understanding of what each product or group does. So that's a way for us to reassess what needs to be changed. But also from the perspective of thinking about the audit timelines. And one of the things we're starting to do more of is stack our audits concurrently. So if we're doing an ISO and a SOC audit, we'll try to do it for the same product at the same time. So it allows us the ability to almost assess our controls as we're collecting evidence. So that way we can refine it post-audit. And then lastly, it also helps with just doing simultaneous audits that are across our organization. So say corporate IT does an ISO audit, and Nutanix the product team does an audit, an ISO audit, and there is a lot of overlap. So it's continuing to improve awareness and actually work concurrently with auditors so that they're only asking for one thing as well that will satisfy both requirements. So that's certainly a win-win there.
Great. So one final question, and I know that this one's a little bit loaded, but I'll ask it anyways. Technology, inevitably plays a part in helping us manage all of this. Just interested in kind of your point of view on the tech that you need to sit there and kind of manage that. We've talked through a lot of different moving parts. And apologies to the audience. This is maybe a bit of a self-serving question, but I'll ask it anyways. And so very quickly, Enrico, will start with you and then pivot to Johan. But any perspective on the technology that you guys would advise people to consider? And you don't have to mention Hyperproof's name. Just you can talk about it in generalities if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things I see is very, very critical to, I would say, less legwork in terms of validating evidence, collecting evidence, is creating common set of procedures, say from a technical perspective, that teams can leverage, and having them located in a central place like SharePoint or Confluence, because there are GRC tools that will be able to pull evidence into a tool. So that way, it's just less work to have to go out and pull evidence. Things move around a lot, but also it allows you to create reminders to have people update information annually ahead of an audit, which also ensures that any processes and other changes are put in place. So that's certainly one big piece of technology that I think is very helpful. Now moving off of kind of that spreadsheet view of managing a program. And then secondly, automation of other evidence items that are collected from, say, AWS buckets or other document storage locations or scripts that can run to pull user lists. I think that's definitely another direction that I think continued compliance efficiency is moving towards. Again, that might be more satisfactory for more specific frameworks that want that level of detail. But again, it's another way to reduce the pulling of evidence manually and then that continued review, with the assumption that there is, a true central location that's consistent, because that's what I feel makes this work with technology.
Great, thanks, Enrico. Johan, any thoughts? I know we're not. I'll apologize to everybody now. The chances that we actually get to answer questions are pretty low, but Johan, I'll let you chime in on the technology side of it, and then I guess we'll have to end up wrapping up, unfortunately.
Sure, Matt. The thing is that you shouldn't fit your process and your modus operandi, your way of working, into the technology. The technology should complement how you want to work. You need, as a compliance officer or as a security team, understand how you want to get from point A to point B, what works for you and your organization, and then find the right tool. Now, I wouldn't recommend that anyone try using file shares and spreadsheets to run a compliance program and to collect evidence and to take auditors through it. There are brilliant compliance platforms out there, and what I'm looking for in terms of technology, and I'm going to try and answer 3 of the 4 questions here. I can see 3 questions on my screen. The one member in the audience say there's too many controls, and some of them are inaccurate, some of them are out of date. Someone else asks, what can Hyperproof offer? And the third question here is, how do you go about rolling out a framework? How do you build a set of common controls? Now, what's important to me, and Hyperproof offers this, is that when I decide to roll out a new framework, there's an out-of-the-box suggestion, a template of requirements and controls readily available. So it's a click of a button, you get your suggested controls and requirements set based on industry standard, and within 2 or 3 minutes you can get going. You can design those controls, get rid of some, add some, tailor it for your organization. But also features that are important to me is the ability to structure evidence, upload evidence, crosswalk controls, make sure controls can be linked to multiple frameworks, make sure I can invite collaborators, assign tasks, And then there's a feature that's really important to me, and that is the ability to get alerts and dashboards in terms of how fresh my controls and my evidence are, and get reminders. So the entire business process and workflow is there to support your security team and not be an overhead and a headache for them. But Matt, the most important thing is that technology and software can't really solve the entire question and answer the question. Every business operates differently. The size, the culture, the industry, etc., varies from business to business. So it's very unlikely that you're going to find a piece of software that works 100% for your business. So what I would advise the audience to look at, and what's really important to me, is to find a company who listens to you, who takes your feedback on board, who walks with you, advises you, etc., and not only provide you with software, but that a company that you can build a relationship with, who's responsive, supportive, and actually is willing to adjust the product in order to solve some of your problems. That's really important. Look for that, and that's what I found at Hyperproof. It's a team of experts who are willing to complement the product that they offer me with the personal engagement and to help solve real problems.
Great. Thank you, Johan. And I know we're at time or a little past time. So I would just, first of all, I'd like to thank the audience, for actively listening to what we talked about. And hopefully we got an opportunity to at least address some of the questions that were asked along the way in the discussion overall. I'd like to thank Johan and Enrico very much for this. Also Brooke and CSA for hosting this event. It's a real pleasure. Happy Friday, everybody. Please enjoy your weekends. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And again, thank you, Johan and Enrico, for joining me today. And thank you, Brooke, for being so helpful and in helping us produce and make all of this happen. And with that, I think it's a wrap, everybody. So again, happy Friday. We're pretty much there. So everybody enjoy their weekend, and we look forward to talking to you sometime soon.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much, Johan, Enrico, and Matt, and also to Hyperproof for sponsoring today's webinar. Really appreciate you taking the time to share some insights today. For those watching, down below the presentation screen, there's a tab to rate the webinar. We'd love for you to review the webinar so that we know what content that you're enjoying. And the recording of this webinar will be available within minutes of the conclusion. You can simply use the same link to rewatch. Thank you for attending, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.